Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call the February Finance Committee meeting to order, please. Doug, is there any public comments this morning?
We have one public speaker, Mr. Murray Bowden.
I'm speaking about distributing board materials electronically, and that each of you should have it. A computer in front of you. The fallacy that you distribute board materials online is a lie, as in L-I-E. It's not true. This was just distributed at the MT Bridges and Tunnels this morning, a report on the Henry Hudson pilot project. Had I had this yesterday, my comments would have addressed this, because it is so flawed and so wrong as to be idiotic. Idiotic as in, boy, they don't know what they're doing. Thank you, Mitch, who was my assistant at the last meeting, pointing out that the highway speed, it's not high speed, it's highway speed tolling, is in use all over the world. And for Bridges and Tunnels to say we have a pilot project on the Henry Hudson Bridge that's so flawedly designed and they're drawing conclusions from a flawed, you're coming in with 2 lanes of traffic on a Henry Hudson southbound, going out with 3. If they took out the barriers between the toll booths, they would have a lane to go smoothly through. Because they refuse to take out those barriers between, it's either 11 and 13 or something there, but there was a toll booth there in the beginning. Now it was just an arm. Their refusal to take that out created a bottleneck because they forced everybody to go through a narrow lane. If you're coming in on the Henry Hudson Parkway with 2 lanes, going out with 3 lanes, and you're going to use highway speed, normal speed tolling, that's the way it should have been designed, and I told them that a year ago. They continue to use data that's just plain wrong, and nobody stops them. Nobody says, well, go over into New Jersey on southbound.
Mr. Bowden, could you please conclude your remarks?
Certainly. This is now the 7th time out of 12 in a week and a half that I'm presenting the request of this information, that the board information all be distributed electronically. I have 5 more to go.
Okay. Next agenda item is the approval of minutes of our January 23rd meeting. May I please have a motion? A second, please. All in favor? The minutes are approved. Doug, could you take us through the committee work plan?
Yes, sir. We have no changes to the work plan.
Okay, that was quick. And then go ahead. Why don't you do Budget Watch
Sure.
right after that?
This month we're doing the February Budget Watch is going to report on preliminary results for both January and February. Overall, the results were slightly worse than planned, as favorable operating results on the agency side were more than offset by some lower subsidy receipts that I'll talk about. Passenger revenues were slightly better than budget by $1.8 million or 0.5%, and toll revenues were better than budget by $1.7 million or 1.5%, mainly due to milder than usual January weather. Metro North, Long Island, and B&T were favorable by 4.5%, 3.6%, and 1.5% respectively. New York City Transit was slightly unfavorable by 0.7%, mainly due to lower bus traffic. Expenses for January. Now, January, they're not all that meaningful because it's very early in the year and there's all sorts of timing things occurring, but we were favorable for the month by $6 million or 0.8%. That was in spite of higher overtime costs that were $6.4 million or 18.1% unfavorable to budget. And the majority of that overage and overtime was at transit. So of the $6 million, $2 million of that was due to unfavorable timing, $1 million from signals inspection and maintenance requirements, and another $2 million from additional bus maintenance requirements. Moving to subsidies, payroll mobility tax through February were $17.8 million, or 5.1% unfavorable. Now, February results can be very tricky because there's all sorts of timing with bonuses in the financial services industry. So we're looking at those results very closely, but through February we are almost $18 million unfavorable. PBT results were $5.7 million unfavorable through February. That appears to be timing. We don't expect that to be a trend or anything like that. Real estate taxes for the month of February were $0.4 million, which was 0.7% below forecast. Year-to-date, $3.4 million, or 3.1% unfavorable. Again, I caution you, January results are very early in the year. We don't want to really draw conclusions, but we've been favorable on the agency operating side, passenger toll expenses and debt service, and that was offset by reductions in PMT, PBT, and real estate taxes. And that's Budget Watch.
Okay, Pat, you want to? Thank you, Doug. Pat, would you do the Finance Watch, please?
Finance Watch is begins on page Roman numeral 4-1 of the committee book. We want to report to the committee that we did conclude our credit substitution, removing Dexia Bank on 3 separate TBTA existing transactions and replacing Dexia with a consortium of banks that includes U.S. Bank, CalPERS, and CalSTRS. In total, you see the totals here: the 2003B bonds of $206 million, the 05As of $132.8, and the 05B2s of $195.6 million. The initial placement of the bonds was very attractive, and if you just turn a couple pages in your committee book, you'll see on Roman numeral 4-5, 4 of the tranches of bonds are in the weekly mode, and those initial rate sets were at 6 basis points on 3 of them and 5 basis points on 1. Turning the page to the top of Roman numeral 4-7, you see the remaining tranches of the bonds that were reset on a daily basis, and you see those initial rate sets at 5 and 6, 9 and 5 basis points respectively. They're all continuing to trade very well, as we would have expected. And those agreements with the bank consortium will be in place for 3 years. So, and again, these rates will continue to be reported every month. Next, we executed a $20 million fuel hedge consistent with the program that we've discussed at length last year in committee. The hedge was bid out on February 7th. We had 3 aggressive bids from all 3 of our approved counterparties. The winning bid was won by Goldman Sachs, and for an 18-month hedge at 3.121 cents per gallon. And as you can see here, that locks in a price that's $452,000 higher than that portion of fuel purchased in the current fiscal year. I would just note that we're seeing quite a spike in the cost of diesel fuel for the fleet right now. This morning prices are about $3.28 a gallon. So this program, is performing as we would expect to eliminate that volatility, a portion of volatility out of the fuel budget. We have 2 transactions we're working on, and if you turn to page Roman numeral 4-2, just to update the committee that we're, yes.
Just a comment on your price of diesel fuel.
Sure.
Some percentage of that is hedged, is it not?
Well, exactly.
That's the hedged rate.
What's your question? Sorry.
The price you just gave.
The 328 is the spot market price this morning. We've hedged about $100 million at prices obviously lower than that. This 3.121 was just a $20 million strip. There's an additional $80 million that is hedged at various price points.
So what percentage of what we're buying is at that spot price, if any?
Well, we're unhedged for about 60% of the portfolio.
Oh, okay.
So the bulk of what we're buying is at spot.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. So on 4-2, to provide new money proceeds for the existing approved capital projects, we're preparing to issue $400 million of MTA transportation revenue bonds on a competitive basis next week. This will be broken up into two subseries, $150 million as a floating rate note. So we'll look to take advantage of the short market with this product. And then also $250 million of fixed rate transportation revenue bonds. So we're actually going to print a preliminary official statement on Wednesday, and pricing will occur next week. Closing is scheduled for March 15th.
What is that floating rate tied into?
So the floating rate is the way the firms will bid on the bond is SIFMA is Securities Industry Financial Markets Association Index. That's our sort of our base index that we report on in here, and it's currently about 15 basis points. They're going to bid a spread to SIFMA, and you know, whatever that spread is, that will be the what we lock in for the period of the bond, and we're looking at 1, 2, and 3 year tranches of that bond. When that tranche comes up for renewal, we'll remarket either through bidding or negotiation to continue to keep that in the short market. And so again, SIFMA right now is very low, 0.15%. So there'll be some credit spread on top of that, taking into account the ratings on the bond. And there is no bank facility. Right. So there's no bank facility. There's no remarketing cost. Well, there's just the interest. Right. There's no just right.
What's the average length
The average length?
of the bond?
Well, the bonds themselves are going to have a long-dated maturity, so they'll mature 28, 29, and 30 years out. What we're looking at issuing is $50 million that will mature in 1 year, $50 million in 2 years, and then a final $50 million in 3 years. There will be we're going to give ourselves a long call provision of 6 months prior to that anniversary coming up, so that we have ample time to get in the market and ensure that we're able to remarket. I'm sorry? No, just no. Because they're issued under our variable rate documentation that's part of the resolution, those bonds are callable really at any time. But the way we're structuring them is the intent is to call them 6 months prior to the anniversary and remarket them.
They are callable at any time.
That's correct. Yeah. No, the last transaction is the Dedicated Tax Fund Bonds 2002 Series A. We are moving forward on this, and this will be our last transaction to replace Dexia Bank. There's $440 million of bonds tied to that bank. We're working with State Street Bank on a letter of credit for $150 million of bonds, and then the remaining $290 million will be issued as floating rate notes, similar to what we were just discussing. The structure is current. We're still working on that, and we'll report back when it's completed. This will be our last transaction to remove Dexia, and that bank has been a problem bank in our portfolio. So this will be a positive development once we get that done. Any questions on DTF? Well, Dexia is their ratings have been downgraded, and I'm sorry I don't have their current ratings, but they've been downgraded. Many of the typical buyers that we would turn to hold this paper, the money market funds and so forth, have shunned the paper. They're not buying
the
it.
government took them over. They basically went back.
Well, right.
The Belgian and French government took them over.
Yeah, and they're
Basically being liquidated.
yeah. So Okay, that's all on Finance Watch.
Thanks.
Andrew, one other question. At the moment, I know we talked about it last month, and we talked about it the month before. The Budget Division has not yet exempted our bonds from the fee?
No, they have not. But we've had encouraging conversations with them. They're very sensitive to it, and it's a matter of us having further conversations, I think. But
So those are still ongoing?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, next item, Doug, you want to?
Sure. We're going to move to MTA headquarters and all agency items, and there are 2 action items today. The first is the 2011 TBTA operating surplus, which seeks approval of resolutions which will certify and transfer $527,658,028 of its operating surplus to the MTA and New York City Transit. Transfer $85,100 representing its 2011 investment income to the MTA. Deduct from the operating revenues for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2012, the amount of $14,548,000, which shall be paid into the necessary reconstruction reserve. Deduct from operating revenues for fiscal year ending December 31st, 2012, and set aside into a special account an amount to be determined from time to time by such authority to help fund post-retirement liabilities other than pension benefits of its employees, and finally, to advance the 2012 TBTA surplus.
Okay, motion, please. A second, please.
Second.
Is there any comments before we take a vote?
I'd like to thank Alan for sending us the money.
Oh, that's very nice of you. Okay, I'm sure he'll accept it.
And
No comment, that's for another day. Okay, so we have a second. All in favor, please? Aye. Opposed? So moved. Doug, mortgage recording?
The second action item is the mortgage recording tax escalation payments to Dutchess, Orange, and Rockland counties. It is recommended that the board authorize escalator payments totaling $1,314,298 to Dutchess, Orange, and Rockland counties from available funds on deposit in the MRT2 corporate transportation account.
Second, please. All in favor? Opposed? Susan, no? No. Okay. The action item carries.
Okay.
Okay.
Next.
Yeah, go ahead.
Next, we move to reports and
Sorry.
information items. The first one is Strategic Sourcing Initiative Update, and Charles Monheim is here to talk about
Charlie's
this.
going to take us through this presentation, and I think you'll find it interesting.
Thanks. Good afternoon. You may recall that a year ago we awarded a competitive contract to McKinsey & Company to assist us in identifying areas where we could further reduce costs at the MTA. At that time, at the time the board approved this, we promised that we would return a year from now before and let you know how the project was going and whether or not we intended to extend it for a second year. The board's approval was for a 1-year contract with 2 1-year options. We're here today letting you know that our intent is to extend the contract for a second year, and we wanted to report on the results that have occurred during the first year. So just to remind you about the terms of the contract, we agreed with McKinsey, and actually there were a number of firms that bid on this, that this is called strategic sourcing, which means we would look at various areas of expenditure. We would try to identify opportunities for reducing our costs, and the fee that McKinsey would receive would be based on the identified savings. So this is a contingent fee contract. This is not a fee for activity, it's a fee for results. The fee agreed was 9%. This could be generated on the basis of operating savings, capital expenditure savings, or revenue generation. And as I mentioned, it's a 1-year contract with 2 1-year options. The results in the first year have been very favorable. We've identified $54 million worth of savings that will be realized between 2011 and 2015. As a result of that, we are paying fees of $3.8 million. In addition to that, there was concern on the part of the board that this not just be a fee-for-service contract, but that also we take advantage of McKinsey's expertise to enhance our own capabilities. So in addition to the sort of improvements in our capabilities through working with them on various initiatives that are described on the next page, McKinsey is also focused with Metro-North on helping them to enhance their own procurement capabilities so that they can work with various suppliers to deliver services in a more cost-effective way. The next page of the presentation highlights some of the areas in which these savings have been generated. We've made significant reductions in the size of our non-revenue fleet. In other words, rubber-tired vehicles of various sorts, sedans, SUVs, etc. In the IT area, in addition to our own efforts, we've worked with McKinsey to standardize the kinds of computers we're purchasing, as well as reducing the number of devices by forcing many of our users to only have one. So, for example, some of our users would have both a desktop and a laptop. We've forced them to choose. As a result of the reduction in the number of devices, therefore, we've been saving money. In the telecommunications area, we've identified significant number of mobile phones and other handheld devices that were lightly used and therefore could be retired. And then more recently, we've been looking at diesel fuel expenses and looking at specialized non-revenue vehicles and finding ways to use those fleets more efficiently. Any questions about any of those? Or okay. Now the next two pages are meant. Oh, I'm sorry, Jim.
I could ask this now or perhaps at the end, but let me just get it out there. The things that they've attacked here or worked on, were there special skills which they brought to the table which made them particularly apt to be able to do these versus our doing them ourselves?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is yes. And basically let me sort of put that in the context of the next two pages. The goal of the next two pages is to demonstrate, as you know, we've been engaged in significant efficiency initiatives for the past few years. Some of these initiatives have been done with the help of consultants. Others have been done very much on our own. I think the point here is that there is room for us to continue to do things on our own, but there are also opportunities to work with organizations that are working with lots of other organizations. Many of these things are not going to be unique to us, but we don't necessarily encounter them in our day-to-day business. So my sense is that what they've brought is, number one, their familiarity with doing this with a number of other organizations, a large number of other organizations, and number two, their analytical capabilities to apply that expertise to our particular case. So, could we have come upon these sooner or later? Perhaps yes, but to some extent we've supercharged our efforts by supplementing our own efforts with their capabilities.
Is it also possible that it's not just the identification of the problem, but also an approach to solving it, which is perhaps specialized or unique to them, and they're able to do it perhaps more efficiently or more judiciously, as the case may be?
When you say solve, are you talking about identifying the opportunity or implementing it?
Implementing.
The implementation remains with us. They are, we continue to manage our own organization. They're working with us to identify ways to save money it remains our responsibility and our sole responsibility to actually do the implementation. So, for example, if we identify, let's say we want to look at cell phones and say if a cell phone is used less than so many minutes a year, it can be retired. They may help us with the analysis, but it is our responsibility and ours alone to actually get the cell phones, take them, and retire them. So they are working with us on the identification and the conviction that there is money to be saved. We have to actually do the implementation. Yes.
First of all, it's good to see you.
Nice to
And
see
I was
you.
wondering how much we'd have to pay you if we were paying you at the same rate for the reductions that we've had here that this firm has gotten. But just we get you at a bargain. My question is, of the amount of money that was saved, these initiatives, and I forget now the number, was about 45 million?
54 million.
54 million. Has that been accounted for in the upcoming budget?
Yes.
So when we adopted a budget in December, all of these initiatives were already, it doesn't go towards filling the black hole that Bob left us with, of the unidentified?
No, it does go. I mean, first of all, we're looking at this is over the 11 to 15 period. Some of it's already been achieved.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the money is accounted for in the 2012 budget. There are still unidentified savings in the 13 to 15 budgets.
Mm-hmm.
There is a placeholder for these kinds of initiatives in the 12 budget. What we're now doing is actually delivering on those savings, and as we do, they are reflected in the 12 budget through moving things from below the line to moving things above the line.
Okay, so in English now, of the $50 million
Yes.
black hole that we had in the budget when we adopted it, how much of that has been identified to date?
I'm not sure that the number was 50 million.
Yeah, Alan, I think you were referring to at the end of last meeting, we said we had 35, which is now $40 million of as yet to be identified additional cuts that would have to be done this year. This does not reflect that. So those are separate and apart. But we did build into our budget, as you recall, certain ongoing increasing targets for savings. And so what Charlie's talking about are items that we've identified to help fill that ever-increasing target cuts. So we are achieving things this way. The number of the unidentified yet remaining for this year that we're looking at is about 63 million between the 40 million that we talked about last meeting and the remaining efficiencies.
Right.
So about 63 million is what we need this year.
And those will, and I think the point of the last two pages is that there is a portfolio of efforts underway, some of which are being undertaken in the context of this contract, which we expect to identify more savings than we've already reported through additional work with our paratransit team, working with the second one is capital, so that doesn't affect our operating budget. But a third opportunity is to deal with inventory levels. Those may be one-shot savings, but nevertheless they will reduce our costs in 2012. And then on the last page, I've provided a list of some of the other efforts that are underway, some of which may come to fruition and some of which may not, but nevertheless gives you a sense of the diversity of things that are being done to achieve those numbers in, I'm sorry. So these are the initiatives that we're working on with McKinsey, a heavy focus on paratransit, capital program, engineering and administrative costs, and optimizing inventory levels. And then on the last page, these are some of the efforts that we're undertaking ourselves, some of which have already borne fruit and will end up being reflected in the 2012 budget, others which are still works in progress. Chuck?
The IT consolidation, is that across the operating agencies, consolidating information technology?
Well, across the operating agencies and MTA headquarters. So there's an effort that's been underway now for the better part of 2 years. All of the IT directors work together. They make sure that they are building off each other's efforts. We're consolidating data centers where we've found centers of excellence for things like security, email, et cetera, so that instead of having 7 email systems and 7 security organizations, we've reduced that to, and I mean security in the IT sense, we've reduced that to 1. We're significantly reducing the number of places where we have data centers, identifying 3 major areas where those will be housed to provide both redundancy and reduce the number of machines. Moving toward virtualization, which is a way of using machines for multiple purposes. So IT consolidation is an organization-wide effort.
So we have then a motion, Doug, to extend the this contract for another.
Actually, there is no motion. This is an information item.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Again, our promise was that we would come back to you at the end of the first year, let you know what the results were, and let you know whether or not we intended to continue for a second year with McKinsey. And this report is an indication, or is fulfilling that promise and letting you know that we do intend to continue for a second year.
I just want to say I think Charlie has done an absolute outstanding job. As a lot of us have been working with Charlie now for years, and he's really captained the business center. I mean, there's just so many things here that he's very quiet and talking about, but really has accomplished a lot. And when I sat down with Charlie before and I asked him, because I'm always concerned, as you know, about spending money on consultants, and that's a lot of money, $3.9 million. And Charlie feels that this is absolutely the right thing for the organization to extend this for another year. He feels we're really getting a lot of benefits out of this, and for me, that's good enough.
Thank you.
Charlie, the last one, the rolling stock, that's the subject of a separate consulting contract, if my recollection
That's correct.
is correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And they're supposed to report to us at some point about additional car procurement, I'm using the word car,
Yes.
literally, and how to save money on those procurements as part of the capital plan, if my recollection was correct.
That's correct. That would include subway cars, commuter rail cars, and buses.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah. What would the
sorry.
comments on your users be about your IT consolidation efforts?
Well, I think generally favorable. I mean, certainly we've reduced costs in a sort of cooperative and inclusive way. Some of the implementations have been a little rough around the edges from time to time. So, for example, converting everybody to the same email system had some flaws. But on the whole, I think it's been very positive. Do you have something specific in mind?
No, I just wondered what the other end of the stick would have to say.
Well, again, I think the other end of the stick would say that some of the customer-facing things on email didn't go perfectly. The BlackBerry conversion was a little rough in some places, but all in all, this has been happening in the background and has gone quite smoothly. And I think there's particular attraction to the fact that it's been happening through a consensus process among the IT directors, and they've effectively been guiding this rather than having it imposed from outside.
Thank
You just want to check on that $3.8 million fee?
Yep.
9% of $54 million?
No. The savings are calculated on the basis of each initiative and a one-year steady state percentage of that. To the extent that we are doing things that are recurring, we get a much better return than 9%. So if I have a $10 million item, let's say, then something that's worth $10 million a year, then my fee would be $900,000, which would be 9% of that, but I get to capture the savings of $10 million in the second year, third year, and fourth year without further cost. So we're doing much better than 9% of
Well, then what does the 54 million represent?
the 54 million represents the fact that some of these items are recurring, and therefore over the 2011 to 2015 period, we expect to save $54 million. And since the fees are only based on a single year's cost for each item, the sum of the fees is expected to be $3.8 million.
Charlie, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks a lot.
You have one more information item. You have in front of you the February financial plan. Unlike the July and November plans, the February plan doesn't really not include any new proposals. But what it does is when we present the November and December plans, there are lots of below-the-line items, and those are items that we want to highlight for the board, and so that they, to draw special attention to. Once that process it results in an approved budget, then what we do is we try to move those below-the-line items into a better reporting document, which is the February plan. We also allow the agencies to make certain technical adjustments once they run their numbers through the different budget systems. So what this is really, it's a technical document. It also provides calendarization, which is the basis by which we report on a monthly basis. So this is really the budget itself. This year in particular, we also made efforts to improve our chart of accounts so we'd have better consistency between the agencies. So there were instances where there were certain fuel categories that were captured in maintenance, maintenance and operations and that sort of thing, and because we were focusing primarily on the revenue fleet. So we think we have a better chart of accounts, which is much more consistent, and that's also reflected in here. Doing the technical adjustments, it resulted in a slight worsening of the bottom line, and as a result, we were required to change the unspecified deficit reduction targets for 2012 from $35 million to $40 million. It was a $5 million increase. Those are going to be recurring savings, and the agencies have been notified of that. The bottom line changed very, very little between December and February, so just, here's the budget, this is what we report on, and that's really it.
Okay, procurements, Doug, you want
Sure.
to do that?
First, we have headquarter procurements, and there are two competitive procurements for headquarters for a grand total of $3,604,232.52.
Motion, please. Second, please. All in favor? So done.
Sure. Moving to the Metro-North and Long Island Railroad Committee, we have one competitive procurement for the Long Island Railroad with the Capital Construction Company for an RFP authorizing resolution. Amount to be determined.
Okay, motion, please. Second, please. All in favor? Go ahead.
Next, we have MTA bus operations. We have one non-competitive and one competitive procurement. These are New York City Transit for a grand total of $7,556,861.
Motion, please. Second, please. All in favor? Opposed?
Okay, next B&T. There are no items for B&T. Next is Transit. We have one competitive procurement for New York City Transit for a grand total of $2,874,823.
Motion, please. Second. All in favor? Opposed?
And next is FIMTAC, and we have no items for FIMTAC. That would conclude the finance portion of the meeting.
Okay, Jeff, real estate?
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Doug.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Andrew. I'd like to give you an update today on our office consolidation project, which is coming along well. But first, we do have two action items. Before we forget, I'd like to ask you to approve them now. They're routine right-of-way licenses and described in the staff summaries in your book. So if there aren't any questions.
Second, please. All in favor? Go ahead.
So the office consolidation, as I previously reported, the gist of our plan is to, A, move our headquarters personnel down to 2 Broadway, and B, find new space for Metro North and the MTA police who are in these buildings in order to empty these valuable Madison Avenue buildings and make them available for redevelopment via a long-term ground lease. And you'll recall that you authorized us last year to hire Cushman & Wakefield and the Phillips Group to help us implement our plan, and that I've said we've been looking at options for increasing the density at 2 Broadway. I'm pleased to say that we've determined that for about $20 million, we can not only fit headquarters down there, which is to say a little more than 400 employees, but also to add another 600 desks on top of that. And that's enough desks to allow us to move the Business Service Center to 2 Broadway and to exercise our termination rights in whole or in part under our lease at 333 West 34th Street. So it's likely that we will move the BSC down there. I mean, we have to work out the logistics, but I think that's Plan A. But the terms of our 34th Street lease are so favorable, about $25 a foot with no taxes, if you recall. And that space is so well located relative to Penn Station that we're inclined to try to backfill that space and shrink elsewhere instead. We do have Long Island Railroad people we can move in there, and 34th Street would be an excellent location for the police. Beyond that, we'll have to see. In any case, our next steps moving forward will be to proceed with definitive design work at 2 Broadway, to choose from among options we're exploring for Metro North, and to issue an RFP for the disposition of this site, which we expect to do in the next few months. In due course, we'll be asking the board for approval of the construction contracts and leases we'll need to enter into in order to implement the plan. But in the meanwhile, I wanted to give you that outline and see if there are any questions. We're very much on track, and we still expect to be in a position to deliver vacant possession of these buildings to a developer 2014 at the latest, which is the target we had previously announced.
What's important is, I think, the project that we all embarked on, 2 years ago, really is going along. I've had a lot of conversations with Jeff. Jeff's spent a lot of time with Joe Loda, and I believe that we haven't missed a beat here. We're moving forward just as we all approved and planned, and I just think Jeff is, right on top of this, and I have no reason to believe that we're not going to make these dates that Jeff laid out.
Is the word disposition, is it defined to mean sale or?
Oh, now, Chuck, come on. I specifically said long-term ground lease for your benefit. I looked over and you didn't meet my eye.
All right.
Thank you, Mitch.
What is the title situation on this building?
The title situation?
Yeah,
in
who
the
holds
sense of
title?
The MTA.
And it's the MTA?
This
it's
is not a
the
master
MTA,
lease.
it's not anything else?
No, that's right. These properties were acquired, I believe, about 20 years ago. From first one, I think, from Milstein, and then in due course we added the other two. In part, to, as I previously described, in order to effectuate the assemblage. I believe that happened about 10 years ago. Sorry? My understanding is that that's MTA capital plan money, but we can confirm that. Do you know the answer to that?
I don't believe so. I don't know, but I don't believe.
No, I think you told me.
Could the
last
rest
year
of
that
us
they
hear
did.
that conversation?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think you told me last year, Pat, that those bonds had been retired. We'll get back to you.
Right. Instead of doing conjecture.
Sure.
Next meeting, Jeff, we
Okay.
provide the information to Mark, to the committee, based on Mark's question. We'll get it for you next time. It's not.
Just if it was purchased 20 years ago, the chances that the debt's fully amortized at this point doesn't sound too high. I don't know. That's just a question.
We'll get
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
Let's do
We'll
it
get back to you on that.
Let's not, they don't know the answer. We'll get back to you.
Jeff, when you make that report, could you see if you can pin down how comfortable you are as to our transfer rights on this building and on the underground? The Grand Central air rights. I think this
Yeah.
is a
Well,
transfer building.
Right, this is a receiving site potentially within the district. We don't own the Grand Central development rights, those are owned
No,
by the
but
Penn
it
Central.
is a receiving
successor.
site, yeah.
It is a receiving site.
Okay.
That's correct. I previously described, it's 15 times the lot area for the as of right, then 3 more with a subway bonus, and up to 21.6 with the TDRs.
Jeff, thank you very much. So,
Can I ask, has there been any, just on a separate but related topic, has there been any update or progress on the Brooklyn facilities? I read in the paper that NYU is interested or looking at the possibility of purchasing one of our buildings. Is that moving or not moving?
Yeah, we're working with the city. That is a master lease property. As we said before, we've worked with the city to look at a variety of master lease properties and to talk about how most effectively to dispose of them and to divide up available proceeds. I don't think there's any it's no secret that the city has been in discussions with NYU, and we're amenable to an arrangement. We'd very much like to see an arrangement that results in a great reuse of that building. At the end of the day, it's not going to be our subsidy of NYU if indeed there's any subsidy at all. And as we've said, our paramount concern is that we're able to relocate the equipment that we have in there, and that that's not at our cost. 370J. Yeah.
okay, Jeff, thank you very much.
Okay.
Motion, please, to adjourn our meeting. Second, all in favor? Thank you very much.
Thanks. You okay?